All right, welcome everyone. My name is Can. I'm here with Linkso, and we have Randy Ritchie from Malibu Compost today. And it's been over a year, Randy, right? Since you've done
Yeah,
it for us. So
yeah.
yeah, welcome
Mhm.
back. And we're excited to have you. So we're starting off mid-spring with a great class. And I'll start letting folks in. Again, this class is being recorded and you can watch it anytime on our website. And I will turn the class over to Randy. So welcome.
Okay. Hey, Ken. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really happy to be back. It's been a while. We've done a couple of, I think, Zoom classes now. We've done a lot of in-person classes, so I'm just really happy. We're back. Hope you guys are all well, enjoying the spring. I know this morning for me, we were out in our garden here. I'm in Thousand Oaks, California area in Ventura County, so Southern California. Been up in Oregon for a couple of years, and we moved back. So now we're just kind of re-getting our beds ready, and finally the temperatures. I know up there things have been off too. It's been really overcast and moist, and I've had to do a lot of compost teas and a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to talk about a lot of that stuff. So welcome to How to Grow Healthy Soil and Healthy Plants in an Organic Garden with me, Randy Ritchie. So got a lot of slides here. Just going to take everybody through it, and we'll just, at the end, we'll do some, Ken and I were talking. We'll do some questions at the end, and just kind of, see what you guys have for us. So, uh, oops. Let me, wonder why my thing is not. Oh, there we go. So, some introductory thoughts. Off of that title, I was just thinking about this when I made this thing up. Like, what is healthy soil? What are healthy plants? What is organic even really? And then what is an organic garden? So just conjure up some of those things into your head. Those are things that were on my mind, questions that are on my mind as I read that title, because it's a big title, this talk we're talking about. The problem, so for me, I'm going to take you back for a little history, right? So the confusion began for the gardening world when it was taken over in the 20th century by chemical companies when they introduced chemical fertilization for agriculture to feed what they call the hungry world. And what happened at that point is we went from a very natural state of gardening and farming into a state where all of a sudden we started looking at NPK, we started looking at nitrogen counts, we started looking at all of these things. And this is over 100 years ago now, that we went from a very, very natural type of gardening. I even learned about some different soil, the first kind of planting mixes and potting soil mixes that they started using back in the 1800s, and I've actually made some of those, and I'm actually using some of those in my garden. But all of a sudden, we went from, but they all had really natural ingredients in them, and all of a sudden, we are looking at how do we use ammonium in our garden? How do we do that? And that's for me where the problem begins. And the problem today is that the lawn and garden industry is controlled by centralized distribution. So we have these big distributors that distribute out to all these places that a lot of you, hopefully most of you people that are on here also buy from Linkso, which is like one of my favorite places to buy stuff at and to go to. I love because their mix of products is very organic and very conscious. But what happens when you have centralized distribution, it's very tied into big business and big money, and it's all about working with these giant corporations that are either chemical corporations, pharmaceutical corporations, and that has no business really being in real organic gardening. And that's where I think part of the problem, has happened. Conventional ag and chemical inputs are everywhere, even in organic. I'll talk about that in a minute. Nursery staff. We go to most nurseries, and nurseries don't have basic biological knowledge. And they also don't know, in a lot of ways, how the biology plays on growing and sustaining healthy plants. And the other thing that I see as a big problem in today's gardening world is that a lot of the garden experts, and by the way, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm a composter, an organic farmer, a biological landscaper and gardener, and so I just learn by doing and learn by living. So I don't like the title expert, but a lot of the gardening experts or gardening influencers, they don't really understand some of the stuff they're preaching when they're saying, "Oh, this is organic, that's organic, blah blah blah." But in reality, they're paid or subsidized by companies with ties to big chem or big ag. So be careful when you're listening and following people. So the problem starts here is we go into all these places. You go into the Home Depot, you go to Lowe's, you go to Costco, you go to all your nurseries. And this, as you see, the wall of death. And that, to me, that's indicative of who's running the gardening world. We're going to get into the gardening piece of this. I like to go and give a little bit of historical and about where we are and why I think organic, and why hopefully you guys are on this class here so that you learn about what real organic is, or what I believe real organic is, but you have to know what the contra is as well. So the problem, grows from here. On the left side here, the slide, you see made from locally recycled garden prunings, food products, and vegetable trimmings. Okay, well, that's an organic labeled product. So where are those trimmings from? Where are the prunings from? Where are the food products from? If it's an organic product, are the products that are in there organic? Then you flip the bag over and it talks about, on a different bag, I was looking at here because they've got a whole bunch of different states where they make a particular product. And it's talking here about the nitrogen, the potash, the phosphate, and it's derived from processed poultry manure. We'll talk about that a little bit further, but so many products that are in, even labeled organic, that are in the market marketplace, have poultry litter or poultry manure or dehydrolyzed poultry litter or chicken litter in there. And those are things that are a slippery slope. The problem builds here because we go into nurseries and go to places, not Linkso, but other places where so many people go to, right? And you see these things like, 2 bags for $14. Well, I don't even know how they can afford to do that personally, because I make soils and I know when you put really, really quality inputs into bags of soils, there's no way I could sell anything that I make for that and give that kind of a deal, because I'm actually putting quality ingredients, quality compost, quality things in there. But you have giant companies like Scott's Miracle-Gro that is everywhere. And and then you see Martha Stewart on TV these days hawking, Miracle-Gro soil, and it should tell you something about them. And then the problem continues here. Organic soil builder. I'm giving you an example here. Is this organic? Do you actually even need soil builder? What exactly is it that I am being told that I need here? So a lot of places sell bumper crop. They sell other types of Gardner and Bloom soil conditioner. All kinds of companies are out there that sell soil conditioners, right? So why do we need a soil conditioner? Because most of the stuff that's in a soil conditioner is wood. Do we need to dump a bag of wood with maybe a little bit of poultry litter or whatever in there to break down our soil? Or is there another way, a better way for us to break down soil in our gardens? I think there is, and I'm going to talk about that with you as we get into some of the protocols. Then you go into another island store. Do I really need all of this to grow a plant? is growing a plant anyway even what I should be focused on in my garden? I'm throwing these things out to you because I want you to know this is where my head goes when I'm looking at the gardening world and I'm looking at my garden. And I started out as a landscaper, so in my career many moons ago. But it was always about fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides and billable plant units. And if there were pest outbreaks, you killed everything. So I'm looking at stuff in stores now, and I'm seeing all of these different things, and I'm going like, "Wow, look at all those shiny, pretty little bags. Do we really need this to grow these plants?" To me, it's confusing, and is organic for these ones that are labeled organic. Some of them are labeled organics, which is a clue for you. Are they actually organic? There's all types of gardeners out there. Like that little guy right there that I'm playing with. He's a great gardener. He's the best gardener I know. That little short dog there. That's Fury the Wonder Dog. So there's all types of gardeners. Conventional, and these are from my perception, right? So they're conventionals, that are chem growers. They buy fertilizers, cheap soils, use free giveaway mulches and stuff, or compost from the city. There's the hybrid organic gardener. You try to use organic, but hey, it's expensive. And you think, but you're not really sure whether organic is worth it. Then you have kind of the organic gardener, that you buy everything that you can that's labeled organic, and that you believe that the organic label is important. And then you've got the hardcore organic person, and that you search everything out and will only use stuff in your garden that is real organic. I am that person. My wife is that person. In our garden, my daughters are those people. And so we've become, we've shifted from the conventional all the way down to the hardcore. And in between there is where you have the transition to organic, where you have the hybrid and then organic. And then as the road narrows, for me, because of health things and because of the stuff that I know being in the lawn and garden market and being a person who makes compost and soils and has a couple farms, I, I don't have any choice but to be hardcore organic. So what is organic? Since we're going to talk about growing healthy soil and healthy plants in a real organic garden. So, is this organic? When you see this in a store, I know it seems ridiculous to some people, but I put it in there because I'm asking, and who decides? So this is, organic choice, and it's, a potting soil, a potting mix with compost. Well, what kind of compost is that? Is that and is that actually labeled organic? Is just organic part of their title? This is part of what the problem why I wanted to put this up to all of you first, to look at, like, this is part of the problem with marketing. We see all of this stuff all of the time that's thrown at us, right? And I know a lot of people that are trying to grow organically. I know people like on the East Coast, like where my little brother lives in Florida. They sell this stuff everywhere at every store, and he reaches out to me all the time and goes, "Isn't there something else that I can be using? Where is there good soil?" So real quick, who runs organic is the USDA Organic. You've all seen that little logo. It's run by the Agricultural Marketing Services. Back in the 90s, we had bills that were coming forth about creating an organic standard in the United States. The bill became part of a much bigger bill, and which included the Department of Transportation, a whole other host of people that shouldn't have been involved in an organic program in the first place. But what we end up with is this very convoluted organic program. So we have organic certifiers all over the country, like here in California, we have the CDFA, and they're given directives by the USDA Organic and by their standards board. And those are the people that, for all the products in the nursery, all the things that are labeled organic at the store, they're the people who are in charge of everything that is organic. And part of the problem is the USDA as a whole is very tied in with big agriculture, which is part tied into big chem and big oil and big money. So now you have another part of them, which, when I said to you folks a moment ago that the agricultural marketing services runs the organic program in the United States, that should tell you a lot about when I start narrowing the funnel here to what kind of products you should be looking for and you should be using if you want to go to the hardcore real organic methodology like we're using in our gardens and that I teach people to do all over the country. That's the reason I bring this up. So you have some history as to why are we here with this very confusing organic products situation that we're in. So what is not organic? So obviously pesticides aren't organic. I see trucks like this going down the highway all the time. Are those chickens organic? Do they eat organic feed? Do we know? Bone meal and meat meal and blood meal. A lot of things that are labeled as organic and that people say, oh, I use these all the time in my organic garden. I go back and I say, hey, what's the source? Where did they come from? That's what we want to know when we're making a determination. Is that something that I want to use in my garden? Just so you guys know, I never use bone meal, blood meal, feather meal. I don't use them because they come from conventional ag, even though they're allowed to be part of organic ag. And I don't use them because the animals eat GMO feedstocks. So those GMO feedstocks are all Roundup ready and they're sprayed with glyphosate and the residue doesn't come off. So, and it doesn't cook out in composting. So the only way you really break down that residue is with heavy, heavy biological inoculation. So for me, I start moving away and the road starts to narrow for me when I start choosing products to use as I start looking at these things. I look at these things, the battery cage chickens, the feedlot cattle. It's like, that bone meal, blood meal that I was telling you about, comes from those feedlot cattle, the battery cage chickens, also the feather meal. So those things, those animals are A, not taken care of well, and B, the feed that they are given is terrible and it is full of herbicides. So I feel very sorry for those animals. I don't farm that way. I don't subscribe to working with farms that work that way. But, and I don't give my money to people that do that personally. So what can we do? What can we do about this? We have to paradigm shift, okay? So we need to change focus and begin to see the soil as a living organism. And then we start to close the loop of our gardens. So just like we look at on our farms, everything that we use as an input there affects the output. So everything that we do on our farms when we're making the compost and what we do out on the farm, depending on what we're growing there and what we're creating there, we make sure where we are that everything is 100% organic. We test for GMOs, we test for pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. We run all kinds of tests on our soil, on our compost that we make, on everything that we do out there. We test our water in our wells. We're always looking to see if there's overspray because where we farm, we're in no spray zones, right? So this came off of, right down the street from one of our farms, so I'm looking to see my neighbors, hey, way to go, guys, have their signs up, so we're in an area where you can't spray, but we're always testing to make sure there is no spray. So I take that into my own garden personally, and I make sure that all of my inputs that I'm putting in to my garden are all clean, are all safe, are all 100% real organic. So how do we start the paradigm shift? We start to look at where is, you'll follow the money always, right? And look to the little guy because the big dog those guys are not the people that you want to be buying stuff from if you're going to transition your garden to real organic, really healthy, and if you are going to learn how to grow really healthy soil. You stop shopping for in the nursery or in the lawn and garden world or on Amazon. You stop buying gardening products that are made with organic flour and sugar, like organic Oreos. So why are we paradigm shifting? Why are we doing this? Well, we're doing it because big money, big chem, big ag is everywhere. You know, most people don't know waste management, where a lot of stuff goes and they start making green waste compost at, and then Recology, they start making the food scrap compost. They are some of the largest businesses in the world. And now we have municipalities all over the place that are starting to create because we have so much waste, which is a big problem, to create more and more and more types of compost from food waste and from green waste. And they need somewhere to use that, right? So what they're doing is they're finding different avenues to put it in different types of soil products and different products for the garden. We don't want that stuff. You don't want that stuff in your garden, 100%. So how do we change the way we grow our gardens? We become real organic gardeners. So what I'm saying here is, if that's indicating that to some, I don't believe that a lot of organic gardening is real. I term a lot of organic gardening that I see going on as faux organic, and which means it's halfway in, halfway out. The way I garden, the way I grow, the way I create things for the garden is I either am or I'm not. And so it makes it really simple for me. And I've learned over time how to transition, because sometimes it is hard. Sometimes we have a lot of plants, a lot of things to do. It's hard to transition what we're doing. But what it takes dedication, and it takes consistency. It's a little bit, it seems a little bit pricey in the beginning, but the stuff I'm going to show you in a minute really, over time, saves a ton of money, saves a ton of time, and also creates a garden where you don't have the pest issues, the fungal issues, the different types of disease that we see in gardens that are grown in either chemical gardens or faux organic gardens, where you're still fighting stuff with products you have to run to the store and buy. So how do we do this? We start by forgetting the same stuff, right? That we've used for forever. Paradigm shifting, when we paradigm shift, we have to learn how to just let go. So for me, when I started doing what I do today, a long time ago, I had to realize that I did not know how to grow a natural or a holistic garden or landscape. And that's what people were asking me to do. I had all kinds of customers and clients that were coming to us and wanting these holistic and natural landscapes. And this is back in the 90s and into the early 2000s. And there was no organic at the time. And so we had to start looking outside of the box and not doing things the way that we had been trained to do them classically as landscapers and as gardeners. And so we started to look for biological products, different ways to irrigate, all kinds of different things that we had never done before. And it started to open up. By doing that, by letting go of the old and having to forget some of the stuff that I learned, it opened me up to a whole new possibility, a whole new realm of things that I could explore. I also opened myself up to the possibility that the people that taught me about gardening and about landscaping and about farming, that they didn't really know anything about what I was trying to embark upon. They didn't know anything about real organics. They didn't know anything about what I was being asked to do for people. And so I had to find other, I had to find other mentors, and I had to find other resources for me to learn how to play in a real organic space. I also learned through this that starting with the landscapes I was working on, and then into the farm, and then into my own gardens at home, I had to learn that there were times where I was going to have to play the part of nature. There were certain times where, because most of us are on cut and fill properties, most of us aren't in areas where we have, old growth, or we have old growth soil, we have fungally dominant soil. We're mostly on cut and fill properties where we have more bacterially dominant soil, where we have plants that are fast growers. We have plants that absorb nutrient quickly. And so I had to learn, okay, so I don't have, I have some areas of my property where we have litter drop, and we've got lots of wildlife here. So we back up to the Santa Monica Mountains, but we had to create a habitat here also that was going to be great for nature. But there's a lot that nature doesn't do that you get just out in nature that I have to do here, and we'll talk about that. And when we get to the protocols. The other thing I really started doing too is checking in on the companies that I was supporting to learn more about them. Back when I started doing this, we didn't have Google. We didn't have like ways for me just to jump in and go online and look people up and look stuff up, right? So I had to start to look at, go deep on that stuff. And then I started looking into financial reporting. I started looking into who owns companies, who are their subsidiaries, what do they do? And I started, and so the web of companies that I used, got smaller. And then the biggest thing that I had to learn, to become a real organic gardener and real organic farmer, was I had to learn how to foster the biology, the microbes that were in the soil. That's became my main focus, and that became, how am I going to support the microbial life and the biological life in the soil that's in my yards, was back then on my landscapes, that today, like on our farms? How do I do that? And that became, and still is to today. If people ask me, like, so, like, how do you garden? And my wife and I, Norma and I, say, hey, we're biological gardeners. So we change what we use in our garden to only real organic and non-GMO. And I qualify the non-GMO, like what I was saying to you. If there is anything that comes from a conventional ag source, is a conventional ag byproduct, we don't use it in our garden. So I won't use cottonseed meal, because most of the cottonseed meal in America comes from conventional cotton sources. And it is a heavily pesticide sprayed product. So a lot of people will sell a cottonseed meal that they use a lot of times, especially like in acid mixes and things like that. I don't use it. I do other things. The other nice thing about being a biological gardener is it allows us to let the microbes dictate soil pH, dictate, play with what it is that the plants are needing in terms of nutrient, in terms of uptake. So I'm very careful about the, non-GMO and real organic. So I'll talk to you about some of the things you can do to make sure you're finding those things, if that's the path that you want to go down. So compost, for me, like the number one thing, the most important thing, compost. I want something that's tested. I want it to be 100% finished. I want it to be real organic. I want it to be homemade or store-bought. Make a lot of compost on our property. I'll show you what our compost bins look like in a second. Also, worms, another really important thing. If you're growing healthy soil, you'll have worms. You will have earthworms in your soil. They are grinders in nature. They break up big parts of organic matter that releases nutrient for the smaller microbes to eat. And then ultimately what happens in nature is the protozoa will eat those other broken down smaller particulates, poop it out, and we've got all the major minor nutrients and trace minerals for uptake by the plants. So we have worm bins here. I'll show you what those look like on one of the slides coming up. I'm into dry amendments and microbial inoculants. I'm very careful about what I use when I use dry amendments. They have to be organic, they have to be non-GMO, and they can't have any of the animal byproducts in them. We use IPM. We use beneficial insects in our non-chemical garden. And so we don't use pesticides. When we have pest outbreaks, we fight pests with other insects. We sometimes will spray some things that they don't like to temporarily get them out of the way. If we're, like we do a couple of very, very large city gardens that you can't have whitefly or aphids flying around during wedding ceremonies and stuff. So we have other ways to handle that too. But we always then come back in and hit everything with insects. And then the other thing too is compost tea. Compost tea, when I was introduced to it back in the early 2000s, was a huge game changer for me in my gardens. If you're not using it in your garden, you're really missing out on something. And it is such a natural, just like compost is decomposition. Compost tea is such a natural source if we're playing the part of nature, because just like in the forest, or out at a savanna, anywhere we are in nature. So what happens is we'll have all this decomposition happening with leaves and twigs and branches and animals, pooping and scurrying across everything, and different water buildup. And as that decomposes, we'll have times where we have the occasional rain, or we'll have rainstorms, or we'll have whatever that pools up. That organic matter, that humic matter that's on the bottom of that breakdown, then gets flushed into the soil. And what happens, because of the weight of the water, those materials get taken all the way down into the rhizosphere, the root zone of the plant, and then the plants are able to uptake them. Really great. It also helps with so many different things that I'm going to talk about and give you some of the 5 things that compost tea does for you that will really help your garden. So, in organic gardening, in real organic gardening, the goal should be to grow the soil microbes. That should be the goal of what you're doing. So, so the next time I tried this out, I was at a huge, we were at a big fundraiser, birthday party, massive thing a couple weeks ago at a big country club down here. That's not where we normally go, but we were there because we were asked. So we went to support this fundraiser for some Waldorf schools. And then it happened to be a big birthday bash for this woman who's a big mucky muck there. Waldorf education is part of Steiner's education. And so we were here. So we were at this country club. And I was being introduced to people as this guy, he's a compost maker, blah, blah, blah. They have this great garden. They're gardeners, And this one woman that sat down next to me was one of the, I hear you guys are big gardeners. What are you guys gardening? What are you growing at home? And so I said to her, well, mostly bacteria, but sometimes, we grow other strains too. We've got, protozoa actinomycetes. We've got, we're actually, we're starting to see some springtails now. That's really exciting. And she looked at me like I was absolutely insane. But it was funny because I then explained to myself, I said, really, we grow lots of stuff, all kinds of crops and stuff, and all kinds of fruit trees and all kinds of flowers. We have cottage gardens and stuff here. But the main thing that we're doing is every time I go out into the garden, I'm focused on how can I help the microbes. For me, it's all about viva la microbes. So compost. So I hope many of you are making compost at home. If you're not, please start. My dad was a management consultant. I'm sure he would think that, as a guy who makes compost for a living, and that's what my company does, he would probably think that the fact that I'm telling you to make compost at home, I must have a screw loose. But I'm telling you guys, make compost at home, because if you close the loop, as I was talking about earlier, of your garden, then you're going to have all kinds of organic inputs. So you're going to be no different on a small scale than we are on our farm, or that we are on our little kind of urban farm where we live here in the Santa Monica Mountains. So we make a lot of compost. I've got 2 bins right now. I'm going to show you what they look like in a second. And I'm about to add 2 more bins. We have had 2 to 3 worm bins going. We're going to add a couple more because we do a lot of juicing. So we're making a lot of worm castings, and we have very happy worms. So that is what really good compost looks like. That's some compost from our farm. That's compost that's been screened. That's compost that's finished. It's aged, and it's loaded with all of the major and minor nutrients and trace minerals. When you're going to buy soils, right, or you're going to make some soil, that's actually some soil that I mixed up. I was out on a job site. We get asked to do a lot of consulting, and so I was out on a job site, actually out in the desert, middle of the desert. These guys really needed organic matter, so that's a bucket full. I made a whole mountain of it, but a bucket full of soil I just mixed up on the site, right? And that looks really good. So I just threw that picture in there. But if you're going to buy a soil, right? Get a great soil, get a great compost, spend your money on compost and on soils. Make great compost at home. If you want to learn how to make soils, there's a lot of places you can learn to make your own soil. I know that at Linkso they sell a lot of the ingredients that you can go ahead and buy and make your own soil. I put some of that in the book that I wrote. I've written about it a lot. I love mixing up soils, and that's just a soil that I just kind of made. We were planting a whole bunch of palm trees, and I'm mixing that up with the sand that's out there. Basically, that's their native soil, and so we were creating mixes to plant a bunch of palms, and also we planted a bunch of pomegranates and a bunch of other things out there in the landscape that day, and that was just kind of the mix we put together. Here's what I do in terms of compost bins. So these are like 3.5 by 3.5 by 3.5, and what I like about these a lot is they open up on the top, and they open up on the side, so that you can dump stuff in on the top. You can layer. We like to start out with a couple inches of carbon on the bottom, and then we start doing our nitrogen at about 1 inch, and then we start with, again, the carbon, the leaves, the dried leaves, at another couple of inches. So we're always saving the material that falls on our property. Nothing goes back to the city. We just use everything that's there. If you have lawn, we have one little area of lawn. The lawn, the nitrogen is very, very hot. That'll come with a lawn. So what we do there is we use it at maybe 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch versus 1 inch as a nitrogen layer. And we're putting that down. We're watering it in as we're doing that. And this becomes a static, these are static bins. And what we do is we let them go for 11, 12 months. And then what I do is that same material that we have that's on the welded wire that's on those, I've got little 2x2 screens, and we screen the compost. So we dump everything on the top, and on the sides there is where we open up everything and take it out when we are screening it. And then I throw everything back in as my compost starter that's chunky and clunky, and I take all the stuff. What I do is I put out tarps, and I'll put out a tarp. I've got some old cloth painting tarps, and I'll just lay them out, and I screen everything over that. And that makes it real easy for me to grab those and take them over to where I'm going in the garden. And then I take all the chunky stuff back and I throw it back into the bin, and that becomes my compost starter for the next batch. So So you know where I come from. These are the cows, some of the cows on a couple of our farms, and so these guys eat pasture. They're in pasture a lot, and they have a relatively really great diet. They have a really nice environment to be in, and their stress level for versus most animals that are in agriculture, their stress level is very low, which is really nice. What we do is so different. So this is the counter side of composting, right? So you saw my home composting setup, and I make a lot of compost there, which is really nice. So we make a lot of compost out of there, and I use that a lot in my compost tea mixes at home, and I also use it in top dressing, which I'm going to show you in a little bit here. But these are how we build windrows on the farms, and what we do is we build these long windrows. We take the manure from the dairy cows, organic dairy cows, and we put them on the compost pads, which are earthen pads. And then right away we put biodynamic preparations in them. If you don't know what biodynamic preparations are, look them up. Look up biodynamic. It's a very old form of farming, kind of one of the grandfathers of organic farming, of modern organic farming, and very much into living soil, closed loop systems, and moon cycles, and everything else in terms of a very natural and holistic way to grow. So when I learned about biodynamic from Alan York and from a couple other people, for me, it was something that I was very interested in because of how in quote organic it was in terms of nature. So I was very attracted to it. So that's how we make compost on our farms. Those get turned. These get very hot when you make compost this way. When I make compost at home, you're really lucky if you even get over 110. If you hit the 120 mark, which some people get, that's very common. Most people never get to 130 with their home composting system. It's very tough. So you just have to let it break down over time, and that's the way to do it. With this, when we put the manure out on the pads, these get to 140 degrees within a couple of weeks, and then you have to start turning them. So and what we do is we turn it 5 times. It's so that we eliminate any of the pathogens in there, the E. coli, the Salmonella, Listeria, and it becomes we never let the temps rise up above 150, 155, because at 160, you start to kill off the beneficial bacteria, which is what we need as a building block to good soil. These are our worm bins. So this is kind of what we do. We actually start our worm bins in our compost. So we use the booze blend from Malibu Compost, or we use the #2 Organics Farm Made Compost to start our worm bins. And then what's happening in here, so the worms are in here. What you're seeing there is we juice every day here at our house. And so we that line is juice pulp that's going in there. You kind of scoop it out with your fingers, a little area, and then you put the juice pulp in there, and then you bury it so you don't get fungus gnats. And then what you do is what you can see how it's kind of on that left slide, it's been broken up a little bit, that soil. So we started out on the very right side of that bin and then started burying it, and that's had two layers of pulp in it already, and then we'll go one more over. And then what we do is on our bins, we harvest the castings from behind the areas as we're moving over to the left. We harvest the castings as we're using it, as we're feeding them. So it's a really great way. It's been super effective. We have some really good castings that we make at home. You can do the same. All it takes is consistency. The other thing too is use really good amendment. amendments. So one of my favorite amendments that we use quite a bit of is kelp meal. I like kelp meal. I like liquid kelp. The other thing that you're looking at right there is volcanic rock dust. So what happens for us in our gardens, we are constantly watering, and we are constantly flushing minerals and nutrients out of our raised beds, out of our containers, and also we're flushing nutrient that's in the soil in our in-ground beds. So we have to every once in a while amend with that's part of us playing the part of nature. So this is us where we are amending because we need to add nutrient and mineral back into the soil. So this is out in my backyard, and this is just a bunch of I was going to do. So when we moved to Oregon, we left our raised beds. We have like 15 or 16 raised beds on our property. So the raised beds that were in the upper area where we have all these raised beds, we probably have like 10 of them there. We just let them be. And we had these 2 years of very heavy rains in California. And what happened was a lot of the nutrient and everything flushed out of there. So nobody grew while we were gone there. We had family here, but nobody grew there. So what we did is we took out about 2 to 3 inches out of those beds. So we made sure we got any of the weed seeds, any of the stuff that might have blown into there. And then what we did is we took all of these things. I took crab meal, kelp meal, oyster shell. I took some bokashi, some biochar, mined rock, and then some compost. And I'll show you in a second here, but we made a top dress, a very light top dress. That's to get the nutrient pack back into the potting soil that's below the surface. So I didn't want to change out all my soil. I knew I could recharge the soil using amendments. Oops. Ah, okay. Well, anyway, we just missed something there. So I don't want to, my thing isn't working right. It's not clicking right. So I don't want to go back. But anyway, the last slide there was beneficial insects. I just had a slide of lacewings and a slide of, ladybugs. If you're not using beneficials in your garden and you're using, pesticides or even, natural pesticides, I think you're missing the boat because there's a lot of ways to, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. The other thing is I wanted you to see, compost tea. So I'm going to talk that in more in depth in just a moment. But so compost tea, I'm really into it. That's my wife doing a foliar at the Morecambe Rose Garden in Oakland. We make buckets of tea where we either do it with aeration or without aeration. That on the right is one of our 55-gallon compost tea brewers. So we brew compost tea a lot. When we're just starting new areas where we want to have add more biology into the soil, we'll do that a lot. When we're just doing a lot of stuff at home, I'll just literally mix up a 5-gallon bucket of compost tea. And if you ever want to know just how to make a really quick tea, and you don't have, you have some compost at home and stuff, you can go onto our website and look up the products, look up compost tea, and you'll just see there we show you how to make compost tea at home, a quick bucket, 5-gallon bucket of tea. So I'm going to talk about the growing healthy soil gardening protocols. And these are what we do. This is how we do it in our garden at home. So the first thing, so on existing beds, what I was talking about, I remove a quarter to a third of the soil, and then I mix in compost, kelp meal, sometimes alfalfa meal if I find a good alfalfa meal that's organic, or if I've got some alfalfa pellets, I might just mush them up a little bit and throw a little bit of that in there. I use rock dust or perlite or pumice. So I've got some pumice. Generally don't use perlite too much at home. I use it in our potting soil that we make from Malibu compost, because if I didn't, the bags would be so heavy, it would be crazy. So I don't, because pumice is kind of heavy. And if I have to add it in, I'll add a little bit of peat or core. But what I generally do is just, do a small, and I'll show you a picture here in just a second, but I usually just kind of just go in and like cover everything with little 1/16 of an inch um, layers of compost, of kelp meal, of alfalfa meal, of rock dust. And then what I do, even once in a while, I'll use bokashi. I'll use put a little bit of biochar in, and then I cover everything with compost. So, and you can do the same thing with your pots and containers. Really, really simple. And you can do the same thing on the beds part up there. You can do that for raised beds or in ground beds, either way. Here are some troughs that we grow in as raised beds, and this is kind of the example of what we're doing there. You can see that um, what's in that raised bed to the left, that's got already in there, that's the rock dust. And we start with that. That's the first layer. And then on top of that, what we just put in there, I went rock dust, I went kelp meal, I went oyster shell, I went crab meal, and then I added, and I had those things. So I just put in what I had. I added some bokashi in there, some rice bran bokashi. I added a little bit of biochar, and then I covered it with compost. So that's about, the layer becomes about a quarter of an inch total of amendment. And then I covered it with a good half an inch of compost. Great way to recharge your raised beds, and then you water that, and then you go ahead and cover that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to water this now for probably 2 or 3, maybe the next 4 days, so that by the weekend I will cover it with potting soil, water that a couple of times, get everything charged in there, and then start planting. If you have time, that's a really good way to do it, because it gets everything active. And I always cover, like anytime you use biochar, I've had people ask me this a lot lately about biochar. If you're going to use biochar, use it sparingly. Don't use it all the time. Use it only a couple of times in your beds, and then cover it with compost to activate it. So in ground, when I'm planting in ground, I always do, like I've got a couple I had a couple fruit trees die while I was gone. So we came back and we had to plant some new fruit trees. So what I did is I do a mix of half native soil, half real organic, non-GMO compost, like Booze Blend, #2 organics, or our homemade compost. And I do a 50-50 mix. I dig my holes the next size. So if my containers are 15-gallon, I make them 30-gallon or 24-inch box size, and then I plant in there. Same thing with the top dressing. I do a very light dusting, 1/16 of an inch to a quarter of an inch, over kelp meal, alfalfa meal, rock dust, maybe the mix I did today or this week at my house, and then I cover it with the compost. And then in all of the areas that I've got in the spring, this spring, I put out a little bit of compost everywhere. So even my little lawn area, my little patch of lawn for the Puri, I put out about 1/16 of an inch to a quarter of an inch of compost, and I water that in. I turn the irrigation on because we have a little bit of irrigation there. The other areas of the garden, what I do, even like, so let's say the area where I have fruit trees, I look at the drip line of the fruit tree coming down. That's where the branches end. You look down, and I make an imaginary line where that is, and I make a swath that's about like 12 to 16 inches, and I go at half an inch in that whole area, and then I water that in. In the other areas, like so in my roses, I compost them every spring at 1/2 inch. Uh, all my other garden plants, like my hedges, that kind of stuff, in their watering wells, I put out 1/2 inch and I water that in. In other areas of the garden where I've got some dirt spots, some open areas, or areas where I'm not growing as intensively, I just take a little bit of compost and just kind of like do this with it, just kind of throw it out there, like, and it lands and it's like almost like a dusting, and then I hit that with some water too. What I'm doing is I'm adding organic matter back in. I've got clay soil. So remember we were talking about, do I need soil conditioner? I don't ever use soil conditioner. What I use, because the compost that we make is more bacterial in nature. It's got fungi in there, but it's more bacterial in nature. The bacteria breaks down the clay soil. So it breaks the clay particulates apart and releases nutrient into the soil. So my property is on clay and rock. And so I am always trying to break down the clay, because now, as we've been here 5 years, the soil is really starting to break down. And that's with just light dustings of compost. Whenever I ever, feel like just going out there and throwing some compost around, it really helps. It grows the biology. So what the compost is doing, and the compost tea is doing, it's offering a food source for the soil biology in your native soil. Or if you are growing in raised beds, you are introducing biology into that soil when you add compost or you start using compost tea. So the goal, for me, is the more biology that I grow in my native soil here, where I've got my fruit trees and I grow our crops like our corn, our tomatoes. Um, I grow pumpkins that roll down our hill. I grow cantaloupes and other melons that roll down the hill. Those are all in ground. I'm trying to build the biology that's in that soil and try to grow that, because I have all this great clay and I have all this other great organic matter that I keep throwing out there, that I want the biology that's in my native soil to break down and release as nutrient into the garden. Now, compost teas. I'm going to show you some compost tea stuff here in a second, but just as a rule of thumb, I do my veggie garden every 3 to 4 weeks. So all of our raised beds, all 16 raised beds, get compost tea every 3 to 4 weeks, and it drenches in normal watering with my watering can. So I literally make the compost tea. I'll do 2 or 3 5-gallon buckets of compost tea that I will put I'll put in a nut sack bag, like that you can make almond milk with, and stuff that you can get at Sprouts or Whole Foods, whatever, they sell them. You can get them online. So it's like a micron filter bag. I'll make 2 or 3 buckets, 5-gallon buckets of water the day before. I let them off gas. And then what I do is, meaning I let them sit overnight at my house or for 24 hours. And then what I do is the next evening, I'll throw about 4 cups of compost into the nutsack bag. I'll add some kelp. I'll add some worm castings. I may add, if I have it, I'll add a little bit of fishbone meal. And then I tie that bag off and I submerge it into those buckets, and I give it a good squeeze, and I let it soak overnight. I let it go for 8 to 12 hours. And then I go out in the morning and I do my drenching, or I do a foliar spray. I just sprayed my roses here because we've had such moist mornings, and when I spray them in the morning, and I spray them top and bottom. Even if they're in bloom, it's not going to hurt the bloom. And why I do it in the morning is because if we have the sun break through and it gets real hot, I won't at all burn or stress the leaves out. So, and then on my things like tomatoes, my squash, If I have anything that gets powdery mildew, I will spray that right away. Sometimes it takes a couple of applications, but the bacteria will definitely outcompete the fungus, and it's a great way to to get away from any. If you've ever used fungicide on anything, this is how you get away from it. You use it as a foliar, and then on the compost tea drenches, if I only use as small an amount, trace amounts of the natural fertilizers that I showed you in the top dressing, what is my fertilizer on my property and on my farms? It's my compost tea and my compost. That's what my real fertilizer is. I don't add a bunch of fertilizers, and I haven't for years. So compost tea. So here's like buckets of compost tea that I've just stirred and I'm ready to use. And I've soaked those for about 10 hours overnight. And I'm going to go out and now apply those. I'm going to use them as a drench. Remember, every 3 to 4 weeks on my flowering plants and roses, anything that's a real heavy feeder while they're in bloom. So that means for months I do this. And then I do this because I grow year round. We grow food here year round. So I am always, literally, you guys, I'm making compost tea at my house like every week. So, and why I like doing extractions versus aerations. This is super easy to clean up. You just wash out your bucket, and then you take the rest of the stuff that was in your tea mix that was in the bag, and I either throw that in my compost pile or I throw it. I have some of my flowering plants and stuff. I'll just go sprinkle that around them. But I don't ever let anything like that go to waste because that's a great biological stimulant and a great natural fertilizer that you can use that you're pulling out of your compost tea extraction bag. So here we are pouring compost tea into one of the wells of our fruit trees. And here's the great thing about compost tea. It feeds your plants, it feeds your soil, it mitigates transplant shock. Everything, when you bring it home from the nursery, or if you do are like us, and we start a lot of our stuff from seed, and anytime you transfer it from one vessel to another area, right, and either in the ground or into a raised bed, that plant goes into from mild to not so mild shock. And so if you use compost tea as you're planting, it's a great way to mitigate that shock. When I was landscaping still back in the day, we used to use that all the time. We made lots of tea, and when we planted our jobs out, it usually took several days, but we would make compost tea every day to apply to our installs, our plant installs. And we had incredible success in doing that, in having gardens that looked beautiful out the gate and made our customers very happy, and gardens that right away we were inoculating the soil. We were building up the biology. The other thing it does is stimulate root growth. As I told you earlier, we get to do a lot of consulting. Excuse me. We get to do a lot of consulting, and one of the things that we do a lot of times, will be sent on projects where things weren't planted correctly, and so their root growth isn't what it should be, and you have issues like dieback and other things that happen. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll do injections at the root level, where we'll bore holes into the ground to root level and drench with compost tea there to get it actually onto the roots right away. And then cover the holes back up with compost, and then make a big drench like you're seeing in the tree well there. We've had incredible success bringing stuff back that looked like it was dying, with stuff that looked like it had massive dieback and wasn't going to make it. I've seen stuff that was on the verge. I saw when I was first working down in the desert on a project, the company I was working with also had a nursery, and so I was there I did a talk to a local garden club there, and I had made a couple buckets of compost tea. And the guy who was that ran the nursery, I said, "Hey, you want the compost tea?" He said, "I don't know. I've never used it before. I'm a little bit afraid of it." And I go, "You got anything in the back or out somewhere that looks like it's going to die?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got 15-gallon roses that look like they're going to die." I said, "Perfect. Put them on then." Those guys. And so I had to come back down to talk to the Plumeria Society down there a few weeks later. And I saw the guy, the manager of the nursery, and I said, "Hey, whatever happened to those roses?" And he got this big grin on his face and he said, "I sold them all to a landscaper." So those were things that were going to go into the trash. Those are just anecdotal stories that I'm telling you that if you're not using compost tea, get on it. It should become your best friend. Now, it also wipes out powdery mildew. Um, and will wipe out rust if you get it early. I've even seen it wipe out black spot early. Otherwise, you gotta prune off the black spot. We've had success with it in a couple of different nurseries with botrytis and phytophthora as well. So it will work. Um, Again, as your reminder, drench the entire garden 3 to 4 times a year. Drench food gardens, roses, flowering plants once a month. Foliar your lawns and gardens, your lawns, really easy to do, and foliar any disease outbreaks. So on the IPM, the beneficial nematodes. So for a lot of us, we've got borer issues, we've got fly issues, fungus gnat issues, we've got cutworm issues, we've got all kinds of issues. If you will do this single thing, so compost tea, and start adding beneficial nematodes, the HB and the SF nematodes, the heterocallis and the Steinernema. If you add those, they're microscopic worms, and what you do is you'll get them in a powdered form, you put them into a bucket of water, and then you drench your beds, you drench areas. I do that in a lot of areas where I'm growing intensively, because what happens then is the nematodes will go after the larvae of a lot of the pests that become big pests in our gardens. The other thing I do a lot is I put out lacewing cards. I like the lacewing cards because they really are what I have found to be most effective for aphids and for whiteflies. And the other really cool thing about the lacewings is when we got back from Oregon, I was walking through our orchard, maybe last month, as we started to see a lot of new fresh growth coming out. And I saw some lacewings, flying around, and I followed them, and they started to repopulate from the lacewings we put out 2 years ago. They're in some of our hedges on the side of our property, and that's really cool because what they're doing is they're in areas where they can be safe, because ants are there, will go after their eggs, and so they're in an area where the ants don't go. They don't go up this particular hedge. So that's really cool. And the other thing I use as a beneficial is I use ant bait stations, and they have a little bit of boric acid in them, very, very low percentage. It's not going to affect your food or affect anything on the property. But what it does in areas where I've got the ants going up my fruit trees, and in different areas of the property, I put up the ant bait stations. And there's certain areas of the property where I just don't care. The ants can just have their run, but there are other areas where I just don't want the ants because they bring other issues with them. And then the last thing, showing a picture here of those are leaves. One has the fungal disease on it, and it's been sprayed with compost tea, and that's what's happened to it. The other thing I talk about, I really like using, when I said to you that, we're on certain properties where once in a while you'll get a whitefly or an aphid out in an infestation. We'll take Castile tea, soap, the peppermint soap from Dr. Bronner's, and do like a 5-gallon bucket with a teaspoon of Bronner's in there. The aphids and the whitefly hate it. It does, at that concentration, it won't stick or cause respiration issues on your plants. So it works really, really well. And then also, I like doing in my maintenance, I like doing green mulches, so I do clover here in vetch. I do in a lot of my fruit tree wells, we do, we'll do borage. And I like to cut stuff down, just chop and drop it before it goes to flower most of the time. And just sometimes, like we just did clover this year in an area we want more clover in our orchard. We really like it. And so I just let it goes to a nice, beautiful yellow flower and let the seed pop on it. And then we just chopped it. And then I just hit it with compost tea, threw a little bit of compost on there, and we're breaking that down. And so that for me is a really great way to aerate my soil, create a really nice nutrient that I'm capturing from those plants on the soil. And it's another way that I keep my weed population down. Also, because I'm using cover crops to cover areas. Last thing, about being a real organic gardener, and then we can. Yeah, I've been talking for a while. Then we can do some questions, or whatever. Just remember to breathe. This is not something that uh, I I try to I try to use um, I try to use the garden as a way to just get out of my everyday um, work life and try to get out of stress. So for me, it's really important. I have a medical thing that is on with me that I really need to live as stress free of a life as I can. So that's super important to me. The other thing is give yourself time. Take time. Don't like. There is no perfection principle here. You just like give yourself the space to you know I book out. Like I just like for me, like I could work 24 hours a day, but I just book stuff out and go like, hey, I'm gonna be in the garden. Like my calendar popped up this morning and I had 2.5 hours in the garden this morning on my calendar. And that was really a great time spent because I got to look at everything and I got to see what we're about to plant. And I got to see some of the starts that some of our seedlings that we've been, ready to put in the ground and just kind of look at everything overall so that we've been home for 7 months since we moved back from Oregon and the garden is finally starting to take shape. And I'm in that place where like, we're in that where the spring is really kind of happening here now finally, and it's time for us to grow and we're getting a little bit warmer nights and a little bit warmer days. Also allow yourself to make mistakes. Okay, the only way we learn is by making mistakes, and so it's okay. If you make a mistake, it's okay. If you overplant an area, if you forget to put the compost tea out that you made and it becomes anaerobic, it's okay. Um, it's all okay. Just, we learn by that. That's how we learn. Another thing I recommend a lot is try to grow your own food. There's no better farmer than you, and you're a farmer you can trust because even when you go to the store, if you're like me and you buy organic food, right? A lot of the organic food that we buy, one of the biggest fertilizers of organic food, unfortunately, because it's allowed as an organic input material, is chicken manure, right? And that chicken manure didn't come from an organic farm. Those animals are fed GMO corn, soy, and alfalfa. They are fed bakery meal, which is all the stuff that is the garbage at bakeries that they smash down. And unfortunately for us in today's modern world, um, they they spray wheat with glyphosate and then cut it to harvest it. So be really careful where you're buying your food from. And so the more food you can grow, the better. And also for when if we ever have, who knows, if we ever have another pandemic or another, where you could get food shortages or this or that, the more you know how to grow, the more space you know how to grow in, the more seed you have, the more adept you are at using very small amounts. So if you look at what I showed you guys today, I use very little input. I don't use a lot of input. And what happens is over time, on the jobs that we do as consultants, we give people a 5-year plan. And our budget at year 5 is about 20% of what year 1 was. So I'm using 5 times as little input on year 5. How can that happen? Well, that can happen because I grew the biology of the soil. And the soil disperses moisture correctly because there's enough organic matter in it. And I've got budding, thriving biological populations that are breaking down organic matter and are making sure that our plants are healthy plants that are disease-free, pest-free for the most part, and super healthy. The last thing, just remember, be a biological gardener. Try to focus on what's important in your garden, which is it's okay to have prize roses or your prize tomato or this or that or whatever. But if you focus on the little guys, the microbes in that soil, I'm telling you, if you guys could walk our garden today and see our roses, you would be mind blown. No fertilizer, no fungicide, no pesticide, no nothing but compost and compost tea. And we have probably, I don't know, maybe 40 roses, all massively profuse. I don't have powdery mildew, even though it's been very moist here for this spring, because I've been spraying compost tea on it. I sprayed it last week, and I sprayed it probably about a month and a half ago. And because I'm feeding those roses compost tea, every 3 to 4 weeks. So that's kind of it. I will say, hey, if you haven't seen it, this is a book I wrote called 100 Years of Deception, Why Gardening Must Change. You can get it on Amazon. It came out almost a year ago. It's been on multiple Amazon gardening bestseller lists for the whole year. And I'm really grateful about that. And the second book is coming out in July, I believe. So, if you haven't read it, it's a quick read, and there's a lot of great stuff in there about in much more detail than what I gave you today about what's in potting soils, what's in soil mixes, what's in green waste compost, what are in all of these things. So it's a very so it was a labor of love. I'm really happy it's done well, and I wanted to share that with all of you. If you need to you want to contact us, Norma and I have we have our website. It'll be up very shortly, but we have connect@growrealorganic.com. You can get either Norma or I there. And if you are into podcasts, listen to our podcast, the Healthy Garden Podcast. We've been doing it for a couple of years, and have lots of people that listen to us from all over the place. And we get lots of great feedback on our social media sites about that. So that's it. So I think, wow, I think I've talked as much as I can talk for right now, unless we have questions.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Lots of information as always. So thank you. We do have a few questions here. So let's see if we can get to them. First question is, when you initially showed a picture of, is this true organic? And it was a big brand product. This person wants to know, where's the OMRI rating for the organic on these products. And I know you have your take on the OMRI rating, so maybe you could let us know, are all OMRI good?
No. So here's the deal. So like, okay, in California where I'm at, OMRI isn't even acknowledged, right? So we have to run everything through the CDFA here in California. That's our certifier. That's our NOP, National Organic Program, USDA Organic Certifier. OMRI is a much larger certifier that it's a pay or play type of place where you have to pay for your certification. And a lot of how OMRI came about was a lot of states wanted to have one place where they could go to and have a one certification that would be the catch-all for all of them. So we do a couple things. We're Demeter biodynamic and we're CDFA and ODA organic, and WSDA Washington State, which gets us that's kind of our OMRI for everything, because most states recognize one, if not all, at least one of those three as an organic product. But for me, it goes back to what I said to you guys. If the organic program allows non-organic inputs into an organic product line, if chicken manure is the or poultry litter is the engine that makes a specific soil, like those soils I showed earlier, go, then is it really organic? In my view, no. I want 100% organic. I want to know it's 100% organic. Or what I'd like to see is our country have different forms of labeling where it's either 100% organic and or made with organic ingredients, which means it's not 100% organic, so you know it, or it's not at all, just conventional. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is, would one use mushroom compost and biosolids in an organic gardening framework?
I wouldn't personally, for a couple reasons. So biosolids, right? So biosolids is human waste that goes through a treatment facility. Does that catch everything? For the first thing I'd say is, like, if you are doing that or have done that, test everything. Like, are there pharmaceuticals in there? What's not been sourced out? And then the other thing on the mushroom compost, so it's so interesting because there's a lot of mushroom composting facilities that are labeled as organic. And I literally 2 weeks ago had a major mushroom compost facility reach out to me, and they wanted to see if we could work together with Malibu Compost or Number 2 Organics with them and try to figure out a couple of mixes. And I said, everything that they were doing sounded really, really good until I got to, so what are you growing the mushrooms in? And it was, they were using poultry litter and they were using scrapings from the organic chicken farms. But I know the organic chickens don't eat organic chicken feed. So, and they also, the way the USDA runs the chicken program is you have a lot of pests in the coops, and a lot of the ways that they clean is very, very toxic. So I'm really hesitant to use mushroom compost myself, and I'm not going to ever use biosolids.
Thank you. Next question is, what is regenerative organic? I feel like we could probably do a class on that topic, don't you think?
Yeah, we definitely could.
Probably should.
So, so here's the funny thing about all of this, right? So we go through cycles, right? Like, so years ago, like, so biodynamic became a big thing. Permaculture became a huge thing. No-till farming became a big thing. Sustainable agriculture became a big thing. And now we have regenerative became a big thing. And now we have regenerative organic, right? So it's almost like I watch over time, like the buzzwords, they come and go, but a lot of them have a lot of ties to the predecessors. Um, there's a whole notion about sequestering carbon that is tied into regenerative agriculture that in some ways I subscribe to, in some ways I don't subscribe to. I'm much more interested in biological organic gardening than I am because than I am regenerative because there are I had a couple guys who were trying to look at becoming a regenerative farm and what it was going to cost them to per acre to become regenerative and get certified regenerative was cost prohibitive to them. So sometimes you can take stuff to a point where it pushes past the purpose. So I don't know. I jury's out for me on regenerative because there's a lot of people that are getting into regenerative agriculture and to the new regenerative certification that are some of the old players from the organic market, the organic gardening world. And in my view, some of them are not completely organic. It's the same, it's part of the same problem that I have with organic just to start with. That I think it's a misnomer.
Thank you. We do have a couple more questions, so we'll move on here. Have you heard of BioComplete compost? Dr. Elaine Ingham promotes making this kind of compost.
Yes, I've heard of it.
It's a short answer.
That's my answer.
All right, we can move on. Does the compost tea work on perennials that are susceptible to powdery mildew, such as bee balm and garden flex?
Yes, it does.
And honestly, that was the last question. The rest are just comments.
Wow.
And yeah. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it, Randy. Are there any closing remarks that you want to share with the folks? I know you've covered quite a bit today.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think really is a lot of times for me, I listen to I think we're in a time right now where I think listening to our intuition is really important. And I listen to my intuition a lot. Um, you know what? The other thing too I would share is so, and I told you this, Cam, when I saw you, but like, so I got congestive heart failure from COVID. So I'm good. I'm super healthy. I'm seeing my cardiologist tomorrow. I've had an amazing run post that. But the one thing I will tell you is that when I first met him at the hospital, he told me that he felt the only reason that I was still alive was because I ate organic food. I was an organic farmer. I got plenty of exercise. I had a good prayer and meditation, regimen. And so he told me, like, keep doing what you're doing and then add the stuff I'm going to give you. And there's a shot that you might one day be over this, be through this. He said, like, there's a small percentage, less than 5% of people that actually can completely overcome it. So I listened to that and I heard that and I was like, okay, then I want to be one of those people. So I keep eating 100% organic. We grow a lot of our own food. I listen to the intuition that I get a lot from prayer and meditation. And you know, on my last test, I was like percentage points away from having a normal heart function again. So I'm really excited to go tomorrow and see what's going to happen. But don't ever count yourself out. Don't ever think you can't do exactly what I'm doing in my yard, and in our gardens and the other places we go to. And um, just you probably can learn a lot more and know a lot more a lot of times than experts and other people that try to steer you places. I've always said this, you've heard me say it a million times. I don't care if you guys buy my compost. Other people will buy it, right? There's lots of people that buy it, right? I don't care if you don't buy the book. I'm just giving you information from my life story. Like, this is my life story. I'm on this path. This is what's up. I just try to share with you what I've seen in a long history of doing this from a person that knows how to do it all wrong. And I'm not saying I know how to do it all right, but I'm giving, we have a lot of history now, a lot of data now that shows like, hey, on lots of acres, we've grown a lot of food, a lot of plants, a lot of roses, a lot of all kinds of stuff very successfully. And I guess the biggest testament to me for that is I haven't used a pesticide or an herbicide or a fungicide and probably a fertilizer in over 20 years, 25 years.
That's impressive. And gardening really isn't that complicated once you get down to just the microbes and growing the soil rather than the plants. So, Randy, thank you so much for being here today. It's always so informative to have you here. And if you folks are interested in other talks by Randy, it's on our website. You can check it out. You can email Randy directly there. The website's or the email's right there. So thank you again for all of you for attending today. And this recording will be on our website as well. So thanks, Randy.
You got it. Thanks, Ken, as always.
Alrighty. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.